In this video, I want to talk to you about 4 ways in which you can learn English. Classes at a language school, classes with a private teacher or tutor, an online course and an app. And also tell you what the pros and cons are of each of them, of course, in my opinion. And I'm going to give you some recommendations so that you can make the most out of each of them. So at a language school, you usually take a test to find out your level and you're put in a classroom with people who have more or less the same level as you. But before I start talking about the pros and cons, I want to make a difference between language schools in countries, in English-speaking countries, and language schools in countries that have other languages. I hope that makes sense. So here in New Zealand, for example, classes are quite intensive. You have to go to school from Monday to Friday for about 5 hours a day. In Argentina, it's not like that. I'm sure that in other Latin American countries, it's not like that either. But I can talk about Argentina because that's where I'm from and that's where I worked before coming to New Zealand. So in Argentina, it was like this. Usually classes were 2, maybe 3 times a week. Intensive courses were for about, had classes about 4 times a week. But in general, it was 2 times a week for about an hour and a half each class. Here in New Zealand, it doesn't work like that. It's quite intensive. Now, let's go and talk about the pros and cons. So what are the pros of studying at a language school? The first one for me is that you are in contact with other people. Whether you're studying in your own country or in an English-speaking country, you have classmates and you have the chance to socialize. Here in New Zealand, for example, you have the chance of meeting people from many other countries. So that's a great excuse and a little push for you to start using English from day one. Another pro, you follow a syllabus, so your learning is organized, which is a great advantage, the way I see it. Another thing is that you get the chance to speak in front of other people, which is good because little by little you get used to public speaking and speaking in front of others, which can be terrifying when you're learning a language. What are the cons? Remember how I said that you get the chance of talking to other people where, well, you run the risk of having classmates, many classmates from your own country. So you run the risk of speaking your own language in class or after class, which is never, ever a good idea. Something else that can be a con, a huge one, is that maybe in a classroom there are people with different levels. I know this is not ideal, and you take a test to be put in a classroom. But the truth is, the reality is that it's very common to have several different levels in one class. So you have people who have a lower level of English and people who have a higher level of English. And it's a problem because those people who have a lower level of English feel frustrated because they cannot go fast enough or as fast as their other classmates, and people who have a higher level of English get frustrated and bored because they feel they could be going faster. So nobody's happy, everyone feels they're wasting their time, and that's something that you can encounter at a language school, unfortunately. The syllabus may not be what you expected, may not be what you need, so you may end up studying things that are not relevant to your life at all, and that can get quite frustrating and boring. Something else that maybe you don't know is that, at least here in New Zealand, you're allowed to start classes any day. So usually you can start on a Monday of any week of any month. So when you start a course, there are already people there who started before, so you don't start from scratch. And you can also finish anytime. So it's not that you start at the beginning of a level and end at the end of the level of a level, if that makes sense. It's not that you start from unit 1 when you start the course. No, maybe the group is already studying unit 5, so if you decide to start that Monday, you will start in unit 5. I hope that makes sense. If you miss a class, you cannot typically make it up. But again, maybe that depends on the school. I recommend this option if you like to socialize and if you can avoid the temptation of speaking your own language in class if you have classmates from your country. And I also recommend this option to you if you like structure, if you like that little push. Go somewhere to commit to your learning. Go somewhere at a specific day, at a specific time. I don't recommend this option to you if you know that you learn better in a quiet environment, maybe by yourself or with just a few people. And also if you don't like, if the routine of leaving your house and going to school every day is draining, tiring, and boring. So if that's you, then I don't recommend it. So a private teacher can plan classes tailored to your needs. So you can be sure that the topics that you see are relevant to you and your life. Usually classes are one-to-one, but not necessarily because a teacher can have several students. Okay, so what are the pros of studying with a private teacher? Since the teacher plans classes specifically for you, you can be sure that you see things that are interesting and useful for you and your personal and current situation. You can typically agree on a time and day to have the classes instead of committing to a fixed schedule, like in the case of a language school. If you miss a class, chances are that you can make it up, but you have to check this with your teacher, what their policy is. You can usually not cancel last minute. Please never do that. And another pro is that you develop a relationship with your teacher or tutor, which can help you get and stay motivated. Now let's talk about the cons. Many people offer their services as private teachers or tutors, and when in fact they are not real teachers or tutors. This is not necessarily a problem, so it depends on what you need. If all you want to do is practice, let's say, conversation, you don't need a professional teacher. You just need someone who's fluent in the language. It can be a native speaker, or it can be someone who's fluent in the language, someone who lives in the country, in an English-speaking country, for example. Now, if you want help with something more specific, like grammar, phonetics, preparation for an international exam, then my advice is to look for a professional, someone who has been trained in the subject and someone who has teacher training. I guarantee that you will have a much better experience with someone who is trained. But again, it depends on what you're looking for and what you need. Again, if you just want to practice conversation, it doesn't have to be a professional teacher, Okay. Another con is that, remember how before I said that you can develop a relationship with your teacher? This can be a con in some situations. If the relationship gets too informal, you run the risk of wasting time in class and spend class talking about unimportant things and not learning anything. And this is where the teacher's professionalism plays a huge role, because they are the ones who should draw the line. If your teacher is your friend, in class, they are your teacher, not your friend. So be careful. Ideally, if they are good professionals, they will draw the line. Something else that can be a con is that because you have classes with just one person, your teacher, you may take it as less serious and end up canceling classes for whatever reason and not take it very seriously. I recommend this option if you like having one teacher just for yourself, if you can commit to the lessons, because you are responsible for keeping the lessons going. Of course, the teacher is there to help you, but it's up to you to continue or not. And if you're willing, to make a commitment and not to cancel for whatever reason. If I were a student looking for a real professional teacher to help me with something specific, I would ask, where or when did you study, in this case, English? Do you have teacher training? Any sort of teacher training? But I would like to know if they're real teachers or not. How many years of experience do you have? What's your methodology? What methods do you use? An online course is like a kind of package that you buy that consists of tutorials that you have to watch and then activities that you have to do. You can usually do them at your own pace, like whenever you have the chance, whenever you want. What are the pros of online courses? That you can get a course that tackles the topics that you need, that you want to see, right? Because you choose the program that you want to buy. And another pro is what I said before, you can do it at your own pace, meaning at your own rhythm, whenever you can, whenever you want, which can also be a con. So because you can do it at your own pace, it can happen that you never do it because you don't prioritize it, you never have the time, you don't have a study routine, so you end up just not doing it. And that's a waste. That's a waste of your money. Another con is that in general, you have nobody to ask questions to, so you have to be proactive and find the answers yourself. So I recommend online courses to those people who are active learners, not passive learners. Those people who are proactive, who can develop, who can create and stick to a study routine and devote time to this every day or several days a week. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. People who can be active in finding the answers to their questions. So these are some questions I would ask myself before buying an online course. Do I have the discipline to complete this course by myself? Am I willing to find the answers to my questions myself? Can I realistically create and stick to a study routine and commit to my learning? If your answer is no, maybe you will end up wasting your money, like I said before, and that's not a good idea. Plus, you're going to get frustrated because of this. You pay for something that you didn't use, and who wants that? Apps typically provide practice on one skill, for example, vocabulary, listening, pronunciation, or grammar. You can use them anytime, anywhere, so you can make the most out of your free time. So what are the pros? Like I said before, you can open the app whenever you have a few free minutes throughout your day, and that can help you be more productive. There are usually levels to keep you motivated. I think that's another pro. Something else that's an advantage is that activities tend to be repetitive, but in this case, I think it's good because it can really help you remember, for example, vocabulary. Now, let's talk about the cons. Something I think is a con is that sometimes activities can be, how can I say it? Boring and not relevant to your life. I remember using an app a long time ago to try to learn French, and I got sentences that were like, for example, horses don't drink beer in French. But like, when am I going to use a sentence like that? It felt so alien, so something that I didn't want to be reading, right? So that put me off of the app. For me, that's a big con. Something else that's a disadvantage is that because most of the activities tend to be very similar, it depends on the app, of course, it's easy to get bored after a while. It's also difficult, challenging more than difficult, to put what you learn into practice. For example, all the vocabulary and all the phrases that you learn, use them in real conversation with real people. So I think apps are good, but I would use them as another tool. I wouldn't rely only on apps to learn a language. That's how I see things. Maybe you have a different opinion. I recommend using apps to complement your learning. If you're using an app because it's fun, that's great. But if you need to learn, let's say, English really fast, I wouldn't rely only on an app. For me, that would be a mistake. I see apps like an accessory, something else that you can do apart from doing something else. If I were a student, I would ask myself these questions. What do I want to get out of this app? What are your expectations? What do you expect to learn from it realistically? What can you expect to learn from an app? And am I willing to commit to it and use it every day, or most days at least? If you use it every day for a week and then you stop using it, then it won't help you much. As with anything else that I've mentioned before, with everything else, you have to commit to see results. My advice is that you do some introspective work to discover what you like. Think about the things that you have tried and what worked and didn't work for you. Maybe you tried going to a language school and you didn't like it, but careful, that doesn't mean that you won't like any other school. Maybe you can have a great experience at another school. The same with a teacher. Maybe you had a bad experience with a private teacher, but that doesn't mean that you won't have a great experience with another teacher. So again, try many different things, try many different methods, and carefully analyze what works for you and what doesn't, so that you can make a good and informed decision. I hope this video has been useful, and see you next time. Bye!